Plus 3, APT, started in 1997, formally institutionalized in 1999. This APT, political and security cooperation among the countries are progressing well, holding regular dialogue and consultations at the summit, ministerial, senior officials, and working groups, expert levels to strengthen and deepen cooperation. ASEAN Plus 3 countries have cooperated in addressing the threat posed by terrorism and other transnational crimes. The first ASEAN Plus 3 ministerial meeting on transnational crime was held in 2004, where the ministers adopted the concept plan to address transnational crimes in 8 areas, such as terrorism, illicit drug trafficking, trafficking in persons, sea piracy, arms smuggling, money laundering, international economic crime, and cybercrime. ASEAN Plus 3 countries further agreed to develop specific work programs in the above-mentioned 8 areas of the concept plan for joint cooperation, designating lead country in each of the areas. Now, it is my also idea, the possible maybe scenarios. The above-mentioned 3 intergovernmental bodies of ARF, ASEM, and ASEAN Plus 3 are currently dealing with East Asian security issues with rather loose consultative manner and in much overlapping way. Recently, both ARF and ASEAN Plus 3 take up so-called non-traditional security threats, largely focusing on transnational crimes. Perhaps the first option could be an evolution of ASEAN Plus 3. ASEAN Secretariat is overloaded and overburdened with so many meetings of SOMs, experts, and ministerial meetings, especially the ARF, ASEM, and ASEAN Plus 3, backstopping works added on enormous pressures to the ASEAN Secretariat. Perhaps time has come to seriously consider establishment of new body, not as a brand new, but as an evolution from the concept of ASEAN Plus 3. It can be called as either East Asia Summit, EAS, or East Asia Community, EAC, by taking over initial functions from ASEAN Plus 3. Its secretariat could be set up separately from the ASEAN Secretariat to serve the EAS more efficiently and effectively, and develop more formal security coordination function under the umbrella. This idea is basically to strengthening ASEAN Plus 3 and build upon it. Second option could be consolidation of the 3. There are many overlapping meetings, functions among the 3, IRF, ASEM, ASEAN Plus 3. Perhaps another idea is consolidation of security issues into one body. For example, a well-qualified body could be ARF. ARF itself could be tightened up and benchmark Europe's OSCE, Organization of Security Cooperation in Europe, and becomes born-again East Asian Security Organization. In fact, this idea is to strengthen ARF and develop as security coordinating regional body. Last, the third option could be maintaining the 3. ASEAN Plus 3 is the politically strongest body among the 3. Therefore, if there is no modification, such as evolution or consolidation, the best security umbrella could be ASEAN Plus 3. Already some progress was made in the areas of transnational crime, terrorism, etc. under this umbrella. If we maintain the 3, duplication and overlapping issues should be sorted out, as well as how the 3 could be linked to each other. Ideally, the hierarchy would be summit, ministers meeting, senior officers meeting, but the diversity and difference of the 3 memberships would be challenging complications. Another issue is whether to maintain both ASEAN Plus 3 and ASEAN Plus 6, or to streamline them into one body, and also what to do with the left-out countries of Mongolia, DPRK, and Russian Federation in the Northeast Asia vis-a-vis ASEAN Plus 3. Six-party talks provided useful consultation to deal with DPRK nuclear issues, although it is stalled and suspended at this moment. How these six-party talks can fit in East Asia security regime will be another challenge as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Our next speaker will be Dr. Charles Morrison, who is president of East-West Center of Hawaii University. He is president for 11 years. This morning, Prime Minister Lee Hyung-woo envied Australian Prime Minister Howard for retaining premiership for 12 years. In Asia, we have a saying that the power rarely lasts 10 years. So I would like to pay some compliments to the longevity of Dr. Morrison. And please.
Well, thank you very much. And if I were really with the University of Hawaii, which is a totally separate institution, I wouldn't have lasted this long.
And also, I would appreciate if you observe 10 minutes rule, please.
I have my watch.
Sure. Thank you.
I appreciate the invitation. This is actually the second time I've been to the Jeju Peace Forum. The first time was 4 years ago, and I've seen a lot of institutional and intellectual development. I really want to express appreciation to those who have accomplished that. Depending on time, I'm going to talk about three things. The first is this question of East Asia peace regime. The second may be briefly the North Korean issue. And the third is this question that came up of regional architecture. On the peace regime, I think we should start by recognizing how far we've come. It's been 30 years since there has been any interstate war in East Asia, 50 years since there's been any interstate war, and I'm not referring to border conflicts in Northeast Asia. So we've had peace, and we've also had economic development. We have tremendous human interaction, which is reflected in the trade, the investments, the flow of students, the flow of tourists, the professional flows, and meetings like this. And then we have norm building, a better understanding of how we should approach issues. And I thought the financial crisis was a good example of that. It's not that countries in this region or in the Asia-Pacific broader region necessarily coordinated their policies, but they moved in the same direction, and they did somewhat under the influence of each other. And Dr. Sakong played a very important behind-the-scenes role in that. And so we've come a long way. But what is missing? First of all, and I thought Prime Minister Lee mentioned this morning, really, it's that the activity has been mainly nation building rather than community building. There is still mistrust. All the free trade areas, all the regional architectures really don't reflect a common project like the Europeans had, but really reflect a jockeying of positions of the larger powers. And so we have Korea, China, Japan, the United States, all trying to develop relationships with ASEAN, but not so much with each other, as we've noticed. So that's one thing that is missing, a basis of trust and relationship and vision and leadership to go with that vision. Second thing that I think we're missing is a global vision. As was pointed out this morning, this region now is really the core region, and I'm talking about Asia-Pacific, including the United States, the core region of the global system. And as a core region, it's expected and should provide leadership, but really our leaders don't think in that way. And so I think that's still something that is out there. Mention was made last night, particularly of the institutional problems in the IMF and the World Bank and so forth, but that's not the only problem. The problem is to have the thinking and vision of how to deal with world problems beyond a national setting. And the third thing that's missing really is not all the countries in this region are prepared to be good partners in a peace and cooperation regime. and that's because some of them lack significantly legitimacy. You cannot be a good partner in an international cooperation project unless you have confidence in your own society and people and a strong feeling of nationalism. Nationalism is the basis of internationalism, healthy nationalism, that is. Now, the big problem, of course, there are two big problems. One is Burma, Myanmar, and the other is North Korea. And the North Korea problem is one that is often discussed in peace regime literature. And it's very difficult to deal with because the North Koreans perceive that they have an existential threat. The bargain is often North Koreans will give up nuclear weapons, we provide them with economic system, and they undertake economic reform. But in North Korea, it's very different from China or Vietnam. If you undertake economic reform and basically admit that your system wasn't working, what is the basis of a separate regime there? And you don't have the nationalist credentials to go back on because North Korea is the weaker half of the Korean Peninsula. Now, and so we should continue to do what we're doing, trying to negotiate on nuclear weapons, trying to open all avenues that we can, keeping the sanctions strong, the countries around Korea working together. But this is going to be a very tough and long-term project. Now, turning to architecture, I think there's a question of what we can expect from architecture. Most of these regional organizations, APEC, ASEAN +3, East Asia Summit, are not rule-making organizations. They do not make regimes. Regimes are usually built at the bilateral level or at the global level. These are institutions that can do a lot in terms of promoting understanding of issues, the norm building, the capacity building, the ability to understand issues that we face together. What role does the United States play in an East Asia community? Well, the United States, as has been pointed out, is not geographically part of East Asia, but it's significant in every other way that matters. A big part of the security regime that does exist, a large part of the economy of the region, very important in social and cultural life. And so if you really want to build regimes, you have to include the United States. The Europeans face the same problem, and I think the model is right. You have some institutions for Europeans only, and you have some institutions that are North Atlantic institutions with Americans, especially in the security area. And so that's the model. I do not think the United States should be part of the East Asia Summit or part of the ASEAN +3. But I think definitely it should be a strong partner in APEC. My view on APEC is that that is the most significant leaders meeting in the region. That should be separated from the APEC process proper, and so that it can fully deal with the political security issues, and all of the other activities can feed into that process at the leaders level. But the one regional cooperation area that is almost completely missing is a discussion of North Pacific regionalism, including Canada, United States, and the countries on this side of the North Pacific. That to me is something that we really should seriously think about. There are a lot of issues there. I would not include the North Koreans' weapons issue there because that should be part of the six-party process and completely devoid from this cooperation. It doesn't need to be at a summit level, but it can be a very good vehicle for the countries of the North Pacific dealing with common problems. In the end, there are two things that are very important in terms of community building, and I think the first of that is the exchange of students and education and learning about each other, and the second is joint research on issues that matter to us. And so I'm very pleased with this activity. I think it's one that contributes vitally to the growth of the regional community in East Asia.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Although you have still several minutes to spend, you concluded your presentation within the certain limit of the time. And lastly, I would like to ask Ambassador Wang Yingfang, who is the Chinese permanent representative to the United Nations year in 1999 to 2003, Ambassador Wang was ambassador to Philippines. He was Director General of Asian Affairs Department of Chinese Foreign Ministry, and he stepped up the ladders from Assistant Minister to Vice Minister of the Foreign Affairs. And also he was, just before President position, he was Vice Chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee of the National People's Congress of China. Dr. Wang, you can have floor.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, I'd like to begin with my sincere gratitude to the hosts for inviting me to this important forum. For quite some time, many of us have been preoccupied by the North Korean nuclear issue. We've heard a lot of words of intense anxiety and violent indignation. It is exhilarating that this forum is to draw our minds to the challenge of shaping new regional governance in East Asia, and our vision shall focus on mutual benefit and common prosperity. Presently, to build peace regime in East Asia, the most prominent challenge is to address the North Korean nuclear issue. I happen to work now with the International Commission on Nuclear Disarmament and Nuclear Non-Proliferation. I have the view that the 21st century will be the century the international community achieves the objective of building a nuclear weapon-free world. With improvement of international relations, particularly relationship among nuclear weapon states, the possibility of those states using nuclear weapons against each other and against other states is diminishing, and the deterrent role of nuclear weapons is decreasing. In the current new historical conditions, any nation which engages itself to nuclear weaponization is going against the trend of human development and will certainly meet with universal condemnation. Even if some nuclear devices being worked out, would they be of much deterrent role? And if nuclear weapons are indeed being used, can the nation get away from the more powerful, more sophisticated strikes of other nuclear weapon states or states? Nuclear weaponization cannot bring more security to a nation. It is to embark on the road to destruction. On the North Korean nuclear issue, China's position has been consistent, clear, and firm. China is resolutely opposed to the nuclear weaponization of the Korean Peninsula. China is dedicated to the maintenance of peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. China does not wish to see arms race in the region. China joined the consensus of the Security Council in adopting Resolution 1874, and China will certainly implement the resolution in earnest. What China has been stressing as the Korean nuclear issue must be solved peacefully. To that end, efforts must be made to avoid further intensification of the situation. Ways and means which might lead to new negotiations must not be blocked. We must leave enough room for maneuver. We should persevere in our efforts to break the present deadlock. As long as all relevant countries stick to the peaceful solution, maintain close contact and consultation, there's still the possibility to discover the way out. The comprehensive settlement of the North nuclear issue is bound to link with the regional peace regime. On the peace regime of East Asia, I wish to touch on the following 3 points. Firstly, maintain peace and forge common security. In East Asia, despite the hostilities and tensions, we have managed to maintain peace for decades after the Korean War and the Vietnamese War. To build peace regime, we must first of all continue to maintain peace. We are all aware that in our region there exist problems such as the unsolved question left from the Korean War, territorial and border disputes, economic and trade competition and frictions. There are also differences in history, nationality, social environment, political system, and values. Therefore, we will have risks of conflicts, even the risk of war, as the North Korean nuclear issue has shown to us. To maintain peace is to remove risks. Anywhere in the world, the fundamental aspiration of the people are peace and prosperity. And peace and prosperity are complementary to each other. In our last plenary session, we've heard enlightening ideas from the 2 prime ministers on how East Asia will evolve for common prosperity and mutual benefit. Now, as we discuss the peace regime, the point I'd like to bring up is that we must promote common security. Regional or international security is comprehensive and indivisible. The security of some countries should not be achieved at the cost of security of others. We must abandon old, outdated mentality, especially the Cold War mentality. We should advocate and adhere to the principle of equality and mutual respect among East Asian countries. In forging peace and security cooperation and building peace regime or security system in the region, we must reach consensus and ensure that there will be undiminished security for any country or countries. We must see to it that the security interest and concern of every country is well taken care of. Secondly, enhance mutual understanding and trust. In East Asia, we have a lot of brilliant ideas about cooperations and regional integration. We have achieved remarkable successes in our cooperations. But we often meet with difficulties when we make a move forward. The deep-rooted cause for the difficulties is confidence and trust. We see cases in East Asia that between some countries, trade and investment are of great volume, and exchange of people's visits is up to millions annually. But when we conduct a public opinion poll, it is no surprise that the mutual confidence and trust among people of the countries concerned are not at the level we desire. It is a protracted and painstaking process to build peace, to build confidence and trust among our peoples. Among East Asian countries, we have already established cooperations or mechanisms for dialogue and consultation in many fields as economy, trade, science and technology, culture, sports, tourism. The exchange and cooperation in any field will be conducive to the understanding and trust and contribute to the overall relationship of East Asian countries. We must earnestly implement what we have agreed upon. On the other hand, we must redouble our efforts to further strengthen our cooperations. We all face now international financial and economic crisis. Every nation has its problems and difficulties. If East Asian countries can join hands and strive together to cope with the crisis, our economies will be able to recover at an early time, and the understanding and trust among us will be greatly enhanced. The understanding and trust thus achieved will help promote regional security cooperation, including building the security system. Thirdly, manage our own house well while we shape new regional governance. As we make efforts to strengthen regional economic or security cooperation, we often encounter different views or propositions in our own countries, sometimes even opposition from some interested groups or extreme forces. The media, which is very influential on public opinion, could be quite negative from time to time on certain issues and cooperations. We can find instances that in building regional cooperations, our hands and feet are bound by domestic obstacles. To boost regional cooperation, we must manage our own house well. We should pay close attention to the domestic public support. If leaders and officials in governments and legislatures work hard to mobilize, unite, and consolidate forces for such cooperation, if NGOs, civil societies, more and more of our citizens understand and support East Asia common prosperity, mutual benefit, and common security, we would have less difficulties and obstacles arising in our own countries. As the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins as the first step. It can also be said that a journey of shaping new regional governance begins at home. In conclusion, I want to emphasize that we have maintained peace in East Asia for such a long time. Relations of countries in our region have improved considerably. ASEAN countries are moving towards integration. Cooperation between China, Japan, Korea Republic, and ASEAN are developing in various fields. In some areas, such cooperations and consultations have been institutionalized. Countries like the United States, Japan, China, Russia, South Korea, which have stronger bearing on East Asia's peace and prosperity, share a lot of common interests. They have established bilateral and multilateral mechanisms of consultation. Although we have difficulties in building East Asia peace regime, the prospects are brighter, much brighter than years ago or decades ago. We should not lose this vision. We should not let problems such as the North Korean nuclear issue blur our vision. Thank you.
Mr. Wang. Now, I think we have successfully managed this session within the scope of a limited time. Ambassador Hong, Minister Hong, defining the East Asian region, he somehow elaborated the necessity of American law in establishing a peace regime in the region. Also, at the same time, Ambassador Afanasyev stressing the key foreign policy priorities of Russian Federation, Russia's strong desire to be a part of Asia. Likewise, the Ambassador Wang of China strongly condemning the North Korean nuclear ambition. Nevertheless, stressing the peaceful solution of the North Korean nuclear issue, he elaborated Chinese position on the peace regime in Asia, particularly stressing the comprehensive solution, such as getting off from Cold War mentality through equality, respect to the equality, and the mutual respect. Also, stressing the exchange and cooperation in the region, he would like to instill confidence and trust in our endeavor for peaceful efforts for building regime in East Asia. In this respect, I wonder how our ASEAN friends regard the role of the United States in our peace regime building in Asia. Dr. Morrison also stressed the necessity of U.S. involvement in this endeavor for building peace regime in Asia. I have a few minutes still under my discretion, and in this juncture, I would like to draw the opinion, the view of our friends from ASEAN. I think Ambassador Chua is here. Is Ambassador Chua here? Yes, please. Could you make the brief comments on this particular, I think, involvement of U.S. In our peace regime building? Mike, here.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I think.
Yes. Okay, it's working. Ms. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. Well, I'm glad to note that most of the speakers had mentioned ASEAN as part of this East Asia, or you call it peace regime, but well, maybe broadly we can just say that